When we were first put on reservations, something happened, and our way of thinking totally de-evolved into something less than what our ancestors had. And I'm going to explain that because this is very important to know. Because the United States doesn't want the world to know, the churches don't want the world to know what happened to Native peoples during the late 1800s and early 1900s. So this is extremely important information because even Indians don't know that this happened. And it shows you how effective this thing was, to the point that it changed our way of thinking from our ancestral way to a different way. In the early days of the reservation, when it was a very difficult time and we were not allowed to leave the reservation in those days, we were not allowed to have weapons, so we couldn't hunt for the foods that we need or pick wild vegetables. We were not allowed to do that. So we only had to eat what the government gave to us, which was really, really unhealthy foods. So we were hit physically. In our way, the self has four parts: the physical body, the mind, the emotional self, and the soul. And those four parts are connected together. So if one part goes down, we become sick. And pretty soon the other three parts are going to go down too, because they're all connected to each other. And where they connect is in a sacred area inside of you called your sacred center. So first of all, our bodies were hit because we're not allowed to eat healthy foods. So we develop heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, and obesity. And then there was a law made in April 10th, 1883 that said we could not practice our ceremonies and we could not participate in their ceremonies and we could not conduct them, and that our language has also become illegal. So that law hit us spiritually and emotionally. So look at that. We were hit in three of the four parts of the self all at once: the physical body, the emotional self, and the soul. We were hit in those three areas at once. That leaves one part left, the mind. And that's how we became weak-minded. We were hit in those three parts: the body, the emotional self, the soul. We were hit in those three parts incredibly, severely hard. And that's how we became weak-minded. Then the preachers came, the churches came, and they saw our condition was perfect for brainwashing. And that's how we became Christian. And during that process, the priests changed definitions of certain words to Christian definitions. So before the reservation, imagine a big house. You define it. Imagine a big house. This was the Lakota way before the reservation. That represents the Lakota way before the reservation. And then, when we were put on the reservations, the priests went in that house, took out one floor tile, and burned the house down. And then with this one floor tile, they painted a cross on it. Maybe they poured some holy water on it. And this is symbolic of Christianizing or Catholicizing that one tiny remnant of that house. And then these priests said, this is the Lakota way. This one little tile. And because we were weak-minded and we were being brainwashed, we accepted what they presented to us as the Lakota way. Even though it's a tiny, tiny, Christianized, Catholicized remnant. It's not the real ancient way at all. That's why most Lakota people today don't know the ancient way. They don't know the Lakota Star Knowledge way. What I just explained here, this is the reason why they don't know. And when I talk about it, they don't want to believe it because they're too Christian influenced. And even when they're not going to church anymore, they're still thinking in that Christian influence. So this is the reason why most Lakota people today don't know this perspective. And when they hear about it, it does not fit their Christian way of thinking. It does not fit their Christian influenced way of thinking. So they reject it and say, that's nonsense. And today, in this modern world, most Indians cannot speak their own language. If you cannot speak your own language, you do not know the perspective of your culture, because the perspective requires the language of that culture. Let me say that again. A culture's perspective requires to speak fluently the language of that culture. I have some non-native students that are fluent, and some of them are getting there. They talk to each other in Lakota. And as they're learning this, they're learning the perspective. So these non-native students know the Lakota perspective, and there's Lakota people that don't even know it, because these Lakota people refuse to learn their own language. I once heard a Cree woman say something very powerful. It's one of the most powerful things I've ever heard in my life. This Cree woman, she's a Cree language teacher, and she said, if you as a native person refuse the opportunities around you to learn your language, then you are responsible for the death of your language. That is 100% correct. So I always get down on all these native people who really think that Indians are different, that Indians are better. That's racism. I get down on them because it's racism. And then I say to them, you know what? If you could speak your tribal language, you probably wouldn't think like that. And they get mad at me. And they get offended. And they say, being native is a state of mind. That's bullshit. Being native requires that you speak fluently the language of your nation. If you can't do that, then who the hell are you? Biologically, DNA-wise, you're native, but you don't speak your language. If you don't speak your language, you don't think like a native. You don't feel it. And your spirituality is not there either. That's how important the language is. So that's why I'm a very strong advocate of native people learning their language, so they regain that perspective. And the most important reason why is for their descendants. I just don't understand why native people refuse to learn it. Instead, they make up excuses and they say, well, it's what's important is, to me, is the culture. It's the state of mind. No, it's not. The culture is nothing without the language. Language and culture go together. They need each other. Both are important for establishing identity. If you don't have one of them, your identity is incomplete. Then who are you? Older natives really get angry. Oh, that offended me, and how dare he say I'm not native, and the native is a state of mind. And one lady said, you know what? I heard the first language was silence. Hey, come on, just sitting there. How the hell do we talk to each other? We have an expression called mitake oyasing. That means everything is connected, everything is related, and to nurture that requires to communicate somehow. We are not mind readers, so that means we have to communicate. It's very important. Native people who cannot speak their language, they tend to become racist. They say they're better than everybody else, but they can't even speak their own language. In Lakota, when you learn how to speak Lakota, you learn to live a life of humility, and then you see that we're not better than anybody. We are part of creation, and we need each other to exist. So if you say you're a chosen race or you're better than others, you're putting yourself above others. We're not about that at all. We're about being part of nature, that we learn to live with nature. And to do that requires a language. And if you're native, then you should learn your native language. If you want to follow your native ways, then that includes learning your native language. And today, in this 21st century, there's lots of opportunities. Some of them are even free. If you want to learn it good, you're going to have to pay for it, just like any other language, because teachers have to pay their bills, teachers have to buy their food. We have bills to pay. So yes, we do charge, because that's our livelihood. That's our job. It's an occupation. So we have to eat, we have to pay bills, we have to pay rent, we have to have clothes. So that's why we charge. But you can start on different places that do offer it for free. And if you want to get better, then you're going to have to make an investment. That's just the way it is. And then some people say native languages cannot be taught in a classroom. They have to be learned in nature. That's not true. Absolutely not. You can learn a language in any format. I teach it online. And my students are understanding the Lakota perspective. We're not in the forest. We're in front of our computers. but but we don't live in front of our computers, but it's a way for us to learn, to teach and learn. I saw a post and I was thinking of sharing it on my Facebook timeline, but I wanted to think about it some more and I decided not to. But I decided it's still worth talking about. I'm not going to say the name of the article because I don't want to promote it. I don't want to promote the person, but it was a young Native woman in her 20s, and she made a statement against self-help. She said that self-help is a white people thing. I say on this show that reality begins within, so to try to do your best you can with your life begins within you. Because this is where reality begins. This is a Lakota Star Knowledge Foundation concept. That's kind of like self-help too, because it begins inside of you. You're taught to look at things from a community perspective, but before you can really appreciate that, you're taught to be emotionally healthy. That means you have to begin with you. So it's actually both. It's like you begin with you, and then you continue that with how you connect with those around you and how you connect with nature. That's like self-help too, because you're doing the work on your own, on yourself. When I say coming to peace with your past, this is something you have to do. There are times where you might need help, but generally you are the one who are doing the work. You are the one who's coming to peace with your past. And from that you will grow, like I said, and you'll be able to appreciate things more and connect more deeply with others. Like attracts like, you will find healthy people like yourself too. So it goes both ways. It goes inside of you and outside of you. Because how you are inside of yourself, that's the way you see the world. What I talk about, that's based on Lakota Star Knowledge concepts. Now, what this young Native woman said was she evidently was in depression, and she went to a therapist, and she said the therapist was trying to give her information, kind of like what I was saying. But she said that in the native world, it's not like that. She said that in the native world, you have a community identity, which I totally don't believe her. She's trying to make an educated response to justify her ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is when you judge another culture by your cultural standards. So she was saying that this self help stuff, this is white people, she said. And to me, what she said was a racist statement because actually all cultures have that. It might be in a different form, it might have a different technique, different principles, but it's the same foundation. And it still does the same thing. And what she's trying to say is that people who learn techniques to create a healthier self, to increase their self esteem and self worth, she's saying that this is a white man's way of doing things, and that's racist, because that's not true. That's absolutely not true. In the Lakota world, when your talent is identified, then you join a society that is based on that talent. And those older ones are going to help you to develop your talent and help you to learn responsibilities with that. But you're the one who does the work. You're still the one who has to develop that. They can't give you the talent. You have to develop it. That means you have to work on it. So what she said is false. And a lot of Native people agree with her, which shows you how dualistic Native people are today. Me, I disagree with her. I think she's totally living in a denial. She's trying to find an excuse to not face her past. See, in many, many Native tribes in North America, maybe South America too, but I know in North America, there are ceremonies where at a certain time you go out into the nature and you have to just be out there on your own, all by yourself. And what you're doing is you're meeting yourself. You are getting to know yourself. That's the same thing that people who are telling you to come to peace with your past. You got to do this. What these tribes are doing is when they send young people out into the nature, this is what they have to do. So when they say they meet themselves, what that means is they come to peace with things in their life that bothered them or they had difficulty with. That's another way of saying to know yourself. That's self-help. So what this lady said was bullshit. No, we had this concept anciently. Lots of tribes had this concept of going out into the nature and surviving on your own, but then you get to know yourself. You have to talk to yourself. Things are going to come to your mind that you were trying to not think about. Now you have to think about it. Now you have to face these difficulties, and you have to come to peace with it. Otherwise, you're not a man. You're not a woman. That's the tribal way. So what this native woman was saying was bullshit. She's just trying to justify her fear of herself. So she's not being native at all. She's being the white person. But see, that's racist to say. That's why I don't like to talk like that. There's good and bad everywhere. And this native woman is showing you an example that not all native people are smart. It's showing you an example that not all native women are smart. So The people who agree with her are also in denial because like attracts like. See how that works? So with that, I thank you very much for taking time to tune in and listen to this show. I really, 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 really appreciate it. And all I ask is that you think about it, nothing more. And in our way, we have no word for goodbye because for us, everything is circular. So it's only about beginnings, starting over, healing, rejuvenation, renewal. There is no end. So that's why we have no word for goodbye in Lakota. So instead we say until next time, which in Lakota is Toksha Ake. So good morning, good day, good afternoon, good evening, good night, sweet dreams, wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this. Thank you very much. And Toksha Ake.
To learn more about speaking the Lakota language, you can read my book called Chante Etanha Ooglake, Speaking from the Heart. You can see the book cover on the right side of this screen. This book contains the information to what I talk about on my Lakota language mini lesson videos. To purchase this book, please click below where it says Show More. Clicking that link will open up the description below, and there you will see a link called To Purchase My Books. As you will see, it's an eBay link. Click on that eBay link, and there you will see the information to get this book. To read more about Lakota Star Knowledge spirituality, you can read my book called Wichocha Otechike. You can see the book cover on the right side of this screen. This book contains the information to what I talk about on my Lakota spirituality videos. To purchase this book, please click below where it says Show More. Clicking on that link will open up the description below, and there you will see a link called To Purchase My Books. As you will see, it's an eBay link. Click on that eBay link, and there you will see the information to get this book. Lila Pilamayelo. Thank you very much.